While they're taking up offering, some of you may know my son and daughter-in-law, Natalie. They had twins Sunday night, so if you were missing me Sunday night, that's where I was, not at the hospital, but keeping the other two while they went to the hospital. So Sunday I had 3 grandchildren, and then on Sunday night I had 5. So when they come in multiples, it doesn't take long to get there, does it? So Paige and Miles, so twins, 1 boy, 1 girl. And so we have had the other 2 grandchildren since Sunday night, so it's been very interesting around my house. Sleeping is difficult when you sleep with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And that's all I got to say about that. So Genesis chapter 31, we've been on a series called the Genesis Study, and most of you know there's about 50 chapters in the book of Genesis. And here's a tidbit, we've talked about this a couple of times. From Genesis 1 to Genesis 11, now think about this, Genesis 1 to Genesis 11 is half of biblical time. So when you get to Genesis 11, the time frame of the entire Bible is now half over. So from Genesis 11 to the book of Revelation is half of biblical time, and from Genesis 1 to Genesis 11 is the other half of biblical time. So we have this very ancient history, if you will, from creation all the way up until the time of the patriarchs. And then from chapter 12 to where we are today, we've been studying about the patriarchs. And we began that back in chapter 12 when Abraham, received the call of God and the promises of God. He said, I'll bless you, and you will be a blessing, and your seed shall be a blessing to everyone on the earth. And obviously the seed is Jesus Christ, because through Abraham, Christ is going to be born, fulfilling one of the first prophetic word that this son of Eve is going to crush the head of the serpent. And so we know that's what Jesus Christ did. So verse 1, now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has acquired all this wealth. And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favorable toward him as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. So put it in reverse, a little history. Jacob has left the land of Canaan, and he has gone to this area of Haran, and that area is where he's going to find, he thought, a wife. And literally he ended up with 4 wives. Why anyone would want 4 wives, I don't understand that, but anyway, that's what happened. So he thought he was going to marry Rachel. Laban deceived him, he got Leah. After that, he worked 7 more years for Rachel. And then Laban gave both of the girls handmaidens that ended up in some way being wives to Jacob also. So through 4 different women, he gave the seed for the birth of what we would know as the 12 tribes of Israel. So now he has been working for about 20 years for his father-in-law Laban. And if you've been trekking with us through this Bible study, Laban is a guy who is seriously deceptive. That's a good word. And he is also really fixated on wealth and money and position. And so that kind of gives us a little insight to where we are tonight. So Laban's sons, and of course Jacob married their sisters, and they thought that Jacob had connived their father out of what they would have as an inheritance in the wealth. Now, if you look at that, it says, verse 2, and Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and it was not favorable toward him. Most of you know in communication about 20 to 10% is verbal, and the other 80% is what? Physical. So there's a lot of things that you can have someone say verbally, but their countenance, and that's the word used here in the Bible, or their body, position, how they say it, their demeanor, it can mean different things. Let me give you an illustration. And maybe you have one for you and your spouse. So Carrie and I have been married 48 years. And so every once in a while, something will happen. I'll say, how are you? And she'll say, I'm fine. Are you with me? So whenever she says it like that with her body language, I hear one thing, I'm fine, but let me tell you the interpretation of that. She's not fine. So you can hear I'm fine one way or, yeah, everything's fine. And the same word came out, but totally different body language. And we all know this. So this is kind of where we are today. So we see the countenance. Laban is saying one thing, but Jacob's reading something else. And then he overheard the conversation between the sons of Laban, and they're thinking that Jacob has stolen or taken some things from their father. So the blessings of God are producing envy and anger in Laban's family. So there's some contention there. And we know from the last chapter that God has blessed Jacob, and some of the things that he's done has brought some wealth and some things into his life that Laban probably thought should be his. So we have a map here, and this map is giving us the location of where they're at. If you look there toward the center top, it says Haran. Everybody see that? And this is in the area on the two rivers that you see there. It's the Tigris and Euphrates River. If you've ever watched the Gulf War, you've seen some of those rivers there. And that arching river going over to the Mediterranean Sea and back down the Jordan River is called the Fertile Crescent. And that's where most people lived and they traveled. And if you went straight across any of that area, that is the Arabian Desert. And it's very dry and desolate, not hardly any water. So most people would never traverse that area. They would always go through the rivers and where the water was, the vegetation and the food with the flocks. And the other part there is pretty much Arabian Desert. So that's where they're at. They're in Haran. And so Jacob has left Canaan to go to Haran to find a wife. Laban deceives him. He thinks he's marrying Rachel. He wakes up the next morning and it's Leah. And then he works another 7 years for Rachel. Then after that, he works almost another 7 years. And now he's 20 years there in Haran working for his father-in-law, Laban. Verse 4, so Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field, to his flock, and said to them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not favorable toward me as before, but the God of my father has been with me. And you know that with all my might I have served your father. Yet your fathers deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not allow him to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckled shall be your wages, then the flocks bore speckled. And another word there may be spotted. And he said thus, the streak shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore streak. So God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. So Laban's actions toward Jacob, you read there, he changed the wages 10 times. So Laban made an agreement with Jacob. He said, any of the livestock that is born, that is spotted or speckled, he said, that's going to be your wages. So we raise cattle, and most of the cattle that I have are Angus, which they're black, and we have black bulls. So think about someone raising livestock, whether it's sheep or horses or donkeys, cattle, whatever it is. And you are, breeding these animals, and every once in a while we will have a black bull and a black cow will have a red calf. That's not uncommon. And we have that every once in a while. Or we will have, a black cow and a black bull will have a black calf that has maybe white on them somewhere. So now, Laban is thinking, okay, I have this livestock, they're of all one color. So if anything's born with spots or stripes, Jacob, you can have those. Those are yours. So guess what God had all the animals start doing? They start birthing livestock that has spots and stripes. So that's the agreement. So let's back up again. So the first one was with spots. And so now they're having spotted livestock. So he didn't like that, so he says, okay, let's stop the spots deal. Now let's go with the stripe deal. And then God had the animals started birthing what? Stripes. And there is a breed of cattle called tiger stripe cattle. Many of you know that. And of course, I have one big longhorn for the grandkids, and the horns are wider than my truck. I mean, she has to go in the trailer this way with big longhorn. And of course, she has spots, like longhorns. So that's what's happening. And God is doing this deal on Laban, and Laban's sons thinks that Jacob is cheating them some way. And it's just the blessings of God, right? And I don't know about you, and I can think about this, and I've told this story a couple of times. I was in the oil investment business for years before I went into the ministry. I have a business degree and did this for about 10 years before I switched in the middle. And I had a guy that I worked with, and he was older than me and been at the company longer than I had. And he was very arrogant and thought he was God's gift to the business world. You ever work with somebody like that? And so I worked with him for about 2 or 3 months, and I got so tired of hearing how good he was, and what kind of house he lived in, and what kind of cars he drove, and how everybody loved him in the company and corporation, that I went into the son of the man who owned the company, and he and I were friends, and I said, could I be sent somewhere else? I said, probably just me, but I think I'm having a personality conflict. And I said, if you could send me somewhere else, I said, I don't want to complain, but this is just not working out good for me. And he leaned back behind his desk and he began to laugh. And I didn't think it was funny because, number one, I was nervous going in there confronting this situation in business. And he leaned back and he laughed. And I said, what's so funny? He said, Mike, we purposely put you with him. And I'm thinking, why? And he said, this is what we said. If he can't work with Mike, he can't work with anybody. And I thought, wow. But he was always, the other guy was telling me, I'm going to be, next in charge, and I'm going to be the one who's going to have this position, and I'm going to be right below the son. I don't know if he's going to be on a throne, Father, Son, and him. I didn't know what he was thinking. But it wasn't long they let him go. And I'm thinking in my mind that God just gives you favor and blessing. Sometimes when you don't even expect it, or sometimes you don't think you deserve it. But if you serve God and you love God, then God does put favor in your life. And this is what we're reading about tonight. God has favored Jacob so much so that it is really causing a stir with Laban and the sons. So now he is going to ask his wives, what do you think we should do? So verse number 10, and as it happened at the time when the flocks conceived, that I lifted my eyes, and I saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. Then the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, here am I. And he said, lift your eyes now and see, and all the rams which leaped on the flocks are streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. For I have seen that all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar, and where you made a vow to me. Now rise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your family. So God is, reaffirming to Jacob, when you see these rams and these animals, He said, they're breeding these streaked and spotted animals for you because I've blessed you. And God's making himself known here. And I thought this was very interesting. I want to share it with you. Not that Jacob would say, okay, I think I know who this is, but God is very specific. Watch this. He said, I am the God of Bethel. I am the God that confronted you when you anointed the pillar. because he put a stone for his pillow and made it a pillar. The place where you made the vow, return to the land of your family. So there is no doubt who God is with Jacob. You think, what's the big deal here? You have to understand, we're in a culture that serves many gods. I mean, these people have a pantheon of gods. I mean, they have a god for the weather, a god for sexuality, they have a god for harvest, they have a god for thunder, they have a god for rain. They have all kind of gods. So when the Lord speaks to Jacob, he says, I want you to know who I am. I am the God that spoke to you at Bethel. I'm the God you made the vow to. I'm the God that you anointed the rock in that conversation. So he is very specific. Verse 14, then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, because this is Jacob having a conversation with his wives. He's saying, okay, here we are. Your dad is not favorable to me. There's a lot of contention here. What should we do? How many of you guys would think it's good to consult your wives before you make a big decision, right? So this is exactly what he's doing. He says, okay, this is your dad. What should we do? Rachel and Leah said, is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not considered strangers by him? For he has sold us and also completely consumed our money. So evidently there was some dowry. There was some things, inheritance set aside for his daughters, and now the daughters realized, we're not going to get any of that because dad's already spent it or consumed it. For all these riches which God has taken from our father are really ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it. So Jacob does not want any family contention because of this action he's going to take against their dad. And now he's consulting the wives, what should we do? And they said, hey, we understand how dad is. You know, any money that we had coming to us, he's already taken it, he's consumed it. So whatever God's asking you to do, you just go ahead and you do it. So their response, and I kind of delineated this out, our father's laid up no inheritance for us. Our father has sold us, or he has monetized us. I want you to let that sink in. Yeah, you can marry my daughter if you'll work for me for 7 years. There's a deal going on here. So the girls say, Dad actually monetized us. It's not that he gave you a dowry. He asked you to work for him so he could marry us. So we have become almost chattel, or we have been monetized by our own father. How many of you got that? And that's what these girls they're thinking. That's what they're feeling right now in this passage. And God has taken from our father what is really ours and our children's. So whatever God has said to you, please go and do it. Dr. Jeff and I were talking earlier today, and we were talking about this chapter 31 has 50-something verses in it. And I told him, I said, we're going to go through all 50 of them because there's so much here you don't want to leave. Because there's so much information and wisdom to unpack here. Verse 17, then Jacob rose and set his sons and his wives on camels, and he carried away all his livestock and all his possessions which he had gained, his acquired livestock which he had gained in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. So he's going to go back home. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols, teraphims, if you have a different translation, that were her father's. And Jacob stole away, or he snuck away, we might say, unknown to Laban the Syrian, in that he did not tell him that he intended to flee. So he fled with all he had. He arose, crossed the river, and headed toward the mountains of Gilead. So now he is taking his wives, his children, all the flocks, the herds, and he is secretly leaving, not telling the father-in-law, hey, we're going to go back home. So that's the picture. Now we have a map here also of Gilead. If you look there, kind of in the center to the right, you see the name Gilead. It's right southwest of the Sea of Galilee, and right along that eastern section there's some mountains and some hills there. So that's where he has fled to, and obviously he's going to cross the river and go back into the land of Canaan. So that's where he's going. Now, on the third day, Laban heard that Jacob and all the family had left. This is verse 22. And Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. Then he took his brethren with him and pursued him for 7 days, a 7-day journey, and he overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. But God had come to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said to him, "Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good or bad." So now Laban is angry, he's upset, he's pursuing his son-in-law, and this is his intention. His intention is bringing everybody back with him. But God had to speak to him in a dream before he got to Jacob and the family, said, "You be careful what you do with Jacob." When I thought about this, I thought about Pilate's wife. Does that ring a bell? So Pilate's getting ready to judge Jesus, and his wife has a dream, and she goes to her husband Pilate and says, "Be careful what you do with this man. I had a very severe dream about this situation." So God is warning Laban, you better be careful what you do with Jacob. And if you remember the other chapter that we did last time that I taught, that Laban understood the only reason he was blessed was because of Jacob. And now he is going after the guy, and God says, better be careful what you do with him. Verse 25, so Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountains, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mountains of Gilead. And of course we could say also. Verse 26, and Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done that you have stolen away, unknown to me, and carried away my daughters like captives taken with the sword? Why did you flee?" He doesn't know the girl said, "Let's get out of Dodge." He doesn't know that. "Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs and timbrel and harp." And I love this line, I might have done that. He didn't say I would have done that. He said I might have done that. It's a big might there because that party would have probably cost him some money and he wasn't going to throw it. Okay? "I might have sent you away with joy and songs and timbrel and harp, and you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly in so doing. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad.' And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my God?" So if you track back a little bit, these teraphims are these household idols, and this was a deal back then. These, quote, little g gods that they served, the people would fashion images of these gods, and people would set them up on the mantle above the fireplace or somewhere in the house, and they would literally pray to them. And if you go to the New Testament, there is some scriptures that talk about the silversmith that made little idols to Diana of the Ephesians. Does anybody remember that in the New Testament? And so when Paul comes to Ephesus preaching Jesus Christ, then this new faith in Jesus is hurting his business because he's not selling as many little images and idols because people are giving up that idolatry and accepting Jesus Christ as Lord, so it's eating into his profits. So now we have this man Laban who has some of those images. And I'm sure they're to different gods because they're polytheistic. And now they've been stolen by his daughter Rachel. So if you will look there, there's going to be a revelation later to Jacob. This is verse 31, and Jacob answered and said to Laban, "Because I was afraid, that's why I left. For I said, perhaps you would take your daughters from me by force," and I didn't want that. "With whomever you find your gods, do not let them live. In the presence of our brethren, identify what I have of yours and take it with you." For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So his wife had actually went into her father's house and stolen those little idols that Laban was missing. So now Laban, verse 33, goes into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the two maids' tents, but he did not find them. Then he went out of Leah's tent, entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols, put them in the camel's saddle, and sat on them. And Laban searched all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, "Let it not displease you, my lord, that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me." And he searched, but did not find the household idols. So that one line, "I am at the manner of women," we think maybe she's on a menstrual cycle or something much like that. So she says, "I cannot stand and greet you because it's this time of the month for me." And here's another added thing to that. So if she's setting on the place where those idols are, that would be considered unclean, so he would not be searching there. She learned a little bit from her dad, didn't she? And so he didn't find those household idols or the teraphims that are in other translations. And so Jacob is going to find out later in the story that his wife actually stole them. He doesn't know it. And he made the statement, did you catch it? You find out who did it and you can kill him. His own wife did it, but he didn't know it. Verse 36. And Jacob was angry, and he rebuked Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, "What is my trespass?" Or, what's my transgression here? "What is my sin that you've so hotly pursued me? Although you've searched all my things, what part of your household things have you found? Set it here before my brethren and your brethren, that they may judge between us both. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried their young. And I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by beast I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand. Whether stolen by day or stolen by night, there I was." He said, okay, if there was any loss, I took it. I didn't take it from you. I took it. So now what Jacob's doing, he's pleading his case. He's saying, listen, Laban, if you think I've done you wrong, let me just give you a little history here. If something died, I bore the loss of it. If something stolen, I bore the loss of it. He goes on. He says, there I was. In the day, the drought consumed me, the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. He said, I was a faithful servant. I was a faithful worker for you for 20 years, and now you're accusing me of stealing something that's yours. So let me just set the record straight here, because that's not what I've done. Verse 41, thus I have been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, 6 years for your flock, and you've changed my wages 10 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and my labor of hands and rebuked you last night. So God had a little powwow with you last night to set the record straight too. Verse 43, and Laban answered and said to Jacob, these daughters are my daughters. These children are my children, and this flock is my flock. He's still pleading his case. These are my daughters. Well, I thought you gave them to me after I worked for them for 7 years. Well, no, they're mine. These children are mine. But what can I do this day to these my daughters, or to their children whom they have borne? Now therefore come, let us make a covenant or treaty, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So now Laban, because of God's speaking to him in a dream, realizes he has to come to some kind of agreement to Jacob. Verse 45, so Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. This is not the first time he's done that, is it? So now this is the second stone that he has set up as a pillar, as a marker, if you will, for a covenant or a vow. The first one was where? At Bethel. That's where he set it up. He anointed it. He talked about it. So now he set up another. Then Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, or we would say a pile. And they ate there on the heap. Laban called it Jagar Sahathduth. That's a mouthful. But Jacob called it Galeed. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore its name was called Galeed, also Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent from one another. If you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives beside my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. So they come, and this is a common practice back then. They set up what we call memorial stones, or a heap of stones. And if you look there, Jagar Hadith is Aramaic. That's what Laban calls it, because he's Syrian. So he's speaking a different language. And Galeed is Hebrew. So we have two different names of the same place. One is Aramaic, one is Hebrew. So if you say, why did they have two names? Because one is given in Aramaic, one is given in Hebrew. So the definition means heap of witness. So we're going to see this transpire not only with Jacob at Bethel, but now here in the mountains of Gilead. So now they put another pile of stones up. If you remember, there was something similar to this when Israel crossed over the Jordan into the Promised Land, to Canaan. Do you remember when the Lord stopped the flow of the river and they actually set up a memorial in the riverbed? This is where God stopped the river for us to cross over. Then they set up another one on the other side of the river outside of the water, because when the water was allowed to flow again, it covered the first memorial, and then the second one was on the side of the bank somewhere on the Jordan. And the Lord wanted them to know that whenever your children pass by here in the future, you need to tell them, this is where God stopped the flow of the river for us to come across on dry ground to possess the Promised Land. Now, let's back up here again. I mean, in that day and time, they didn't have some kind of paper and sign it and take it to the notary. But they would do this as a memorial or a witness for the posterity later. This is what this meant. And these things were actually memorialized from generation to generation to generation. And if you ever read in the Proverbs about people moving the old landmarks, then you would understand a lot of the boundaries and the treaties and the covenants were made by these different landmarks and memorials. In Oklahoma, we have section, township, and range. Does anybody know what that is? In West Texas, they have section, township, and range. In Louisiana, they have parishes. In East Texas, which was settled a long time before West Texas, they had what they would call different surveys. And when I would go down to buy leases or mineral rights or something, they would have surveys, and this is how it began. So let's say Dr. Jeff and I, we are going to buy some property in East Texas. So the description would be something like this back in the early 1800s. Well, our property is going to run along the east side of the river here over to this tree, and we're going to go over here to this pile of rocks. Then we're going to go from that pile of rocks over to this tree that has the double axe mark on it. And then it's going to go back to the river. Well, here's the problem. 100 years later, the pile of rocks is gone and the tree's gone. But yet they have established those boundaries over the years, and they call them surveys. And if you sell something inside of that, then it's described that way, not as section, township, and range, but it was described through landmarks. And even some of the old timers, your land was so many turns of the wagon wheel this far. So they would mark the wheel 1, 2, 3, 4, 100,000, whatever, and that's how your land was marked. But how many of you know we don't describe land like that anymore? But back then, that was pretty common practice. So when the Bible say don't remove the old landmarks, because these were generational marks, monuments that they would raise up, and that's how they really, remembered covenants and treaties and also the property line. So we see a little glimpse of that right here. And now they raise up this gathering of stones, and it's going to be a witness. So this gets even more interesting to me. Verse 51, then Laban said to Jacob, here is this heap, and here is this pillar, which I have placed between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness. So they have one large stone in the middle, and then they've heaped stones around it. That I will not pass beyond this heap to you, and you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm. So this is kind of like a line in the sand. You stay on your side, I'll stay on my side. Did you get that from that passage? He said, you're going to stay over here, and I'm going to stay over here. And Jacob agrees to this. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his brethren to eat bread. And they ate bread, stayed all night on the mountain. And early in the morning Laban arose, kissed his sons and daughters, and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. This is the last time they will ever see each other. It's the last time the girls will ever see their father. It's the last time the grandkids will ever see their grandfather. So Laban only is mentioned again by name, but never again does he appear in biblical scripture. So now this is a parting of the ways. This is saying goodbye to Dad, saying goodbye to grandfather, and their paths will not cross again. And in this treaty, in this covenant, they've made it very clear, I will not go past here to you, and you do not go past here to me. And if we do pass, it will be no harm. But that's the covenant they made. That's kind of sad in some way, isn't it to you? But anyway, one of the things that I noticed here, that Laban swore by the God of Abraham, Nahor, and the God of their father. There's a couple of things I didn't really understand here. I can't give you the full definition of this, but if you go back to the idols, who stole my idols, who moved my cheese or whatever. So he has these idols in his home, and obviously he has some kind of affiliation, affection for them. I don't know if he's worshiping them, bowing down to them, or whatever the case may be. But yet he also includes God, that we know as Jehovah God, in this. So is he swearing by the God of Abraham, Nahor, and the God of their father, which is another God? Because we know if we trace Abraham's lineage a little further back, that they serve false gods in Ur the Chaldeans. So does he include Jehovah God and other gods in this swearing, or is he the whole swearing just swearing by Jehovah God? I'm not sure because of the language. It appears he's just doing it by Jehovah, but I don't know. But Jacob swears by the fear of his father Isaac, which is in some way a Hebrewism, that I am going to swear by my father who fears Jehovah God. So if you look at that, the fear of my father Isaac. So I don't think Jacob is just saying, I fear my father, and certainly there is a great deal of respect fear, not fear I'm afraid of. And so I think that Jacob is saying, I reverence the God of my father Isaac in the swearing. So that's how Jacob swears. So now at the end, and this is 55 verses that we just went through, there is a lot of unpacking of this family through the course of biblical history. Now, if you were with us last time, this is what we said. When the Bible tells us about these people and their families, it is really unpacking a lot of dysfunction, correct? So when you read the Bible doesn't just, give us, these are all perfect people. These are imperfect people, which gives me a lot of hope that God would love me because I'm very imperfect. So we see, Abraham, we see Isaac, now we're at Jacob, and all of them have some pretty tough character flaws. And if you look around to your family, your friends, and even our own personal lives, we can have some pretty tough character flaws. But yet God still loves us, even in our imperfection, and that's why His mercy and grace is so wonderful, right? Because it gives me hope that God could love somebody like me, because I have some real issues in my own personal life. And there comes a point when you read these generations of families, and some of this dysfunction is passed on to the next generation, and as we've already, rehearsed this, there has to be someone who comes along and says, I'm going to stop this with me. I'm not going to pass this dysfunction on to my sons, my daughters. This character flaw that we've had in our family, or this almost like a curse that we've had in our family. Somebody's got to be courageous enough and bold enough and wise enough and really tough enough to say, this stops with us. We're not going to live this way anymore. We're going to change the way we live. We're going to change the way we parent. We're going to change the way we work. We're going to change the way that we move forward, because I don't want my kids to go through this. And this is something that obviously we see in the Word of God, and we have to really address this. Now, you would think in chapter 31, Jacob's on the other side going, whew, man, 21 years I've been living this. This is tough. So in the matter of a few verses, we go 21 years. And you think, wow, Jacob, good you got out of Dodge here, because you were in a tough place for 21 years. It's going to be better now. Then we have the next chapter. We're not going to get into that, but here's where we're going the next time. So Jacob's been gone for 21 years. He's going back home. And guess who's there waiting for him? His brother Esau, he deceived 21 years before. And his brother Esau said, if I ever see you again, I'm going to kill you. Now remember, God said, go home to the land of your fathers. Did you read it? He said, go home to the land. Okay, God, I got that. But here's something you don't know, God. I got a brother waiting there, and he said he's going to vow to kill me. And you're telling me to go walk into that? Have you ever felt like sometimes God directed you to do something and God didn't have all the information? God, let me tell you about this, or let me just allow you to know this. How many of you know God already knows everything? I mean, he's omniscient. He knows everything. So maybe you're here tonight and say, Pastor, I'm facing, it's a job situation. I don't know what to do. It's a financial situation. It's a marriage deal. It's a family deal. It's a personal deal. And maybe you don't know what I'm up against. Let me tell you something. God knows what you're up against. He really does. So you can go forward in faith and in confidence. If you trust God, the Bible's very clear. He'll never forsake you. He'll never leave you. He's going to guide you. If you were here Sunday, we talked about, the leadership of the Holy Spirit to guide us and to comfort us and to give us what? Information about our future that we don't know. And now we have the God of Jacob here, and now God's going to be referred to in the future. And you know this, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And now Jacob is living it. I mean, he's right in the middle of the story. And I'm sure in his mind he's thinking, I've got to go home. I need to go home, but my brother is vowed to kill me. And so you get out of one situation, and now you feel like you're walking right into another one. Have you ever felt that way? God, could you just give me a little break between? Could you give me a little vacation between this deal and that deal? And we're going to read this story, and you've heard this ever since Sunday school, that Jacob wrestled with the angel. How many of you remember that story? Jacob wrestling with the angel. And in that wrestling, I believe Jacob actually thought his brother Esau was on him, because it's at night, he's close to the border, he's close to going home, he's by himself, and he's strategizing, and we're going to read it, what do I do to get my family back home? He actually divided his wives and his children up, because he thought if Esau and Esau's men, because Esau became a very great man also, if they attack us, maybe some of us could escape. That's what he's thinking. I mean, goodness gracious, how do you process that? This is out of our wheelhouse. This is a different time, different culture, different place. This is eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, and there's a lot of people without teeth and eyes back then. This is even, before the law is given, but I'm going to tell you, this is the culture they live in. You do this to me, I'm going to do more to you. So he's trying to bring his whole family back home, and he's facing this, and this guy actually divides his family up so maybe some of us can survive. It's hard for me to even get my mind around that with my family and my grandkids. I mean, how would you process that? And then he separates himself in the middle of the night away from his family, away from the kids, and he's thinking, how do I fix this? How do I go forward? I've got out of this situation with my father-in-law. Now I'm going to go back into this situation with my brother. Hello, this is all family. We're not talking about any outsiders here. This is all family business right here. This is a father-in-law and a brother. This is not the crazy neighbor down the street. This is in your family. How do I process this? And in the middle, while he's out by himself, thinking what he's going to do, the angel of the Lord appears, and Jacob thinks somebody is there to get him, and he wrestles with him almost all night long. And the wonderful thing, I actually shared this at a conference 2 weeks ago, that when the angel is wrestling with Jacob, the angel says to Jacob, he says, let me go. He didn't call him by name. And the angel is trying to separate himself from Jacob. Let me go. And Jacob finally figures out this is not his brother Esau. He said, I'm not going to let you go till you bless me. And the angel of the Lord asked him a question. He said, what's your name? How many of you know God knows your name? And God knew Jacob's name. Let me go a little bit deeper. God knows the very number of hair on your head right now. And with me, every day he has to recount. Because I look at the shower, I say, okay, God, recount today. God knows, and this is scriptural, he knows the very number of hair on your head. That's how personally God knows you. And now, the God of the universe, omniscient, that knows everything, is asking one of his creation, what's your name? Why does he do that? And Jacob said, my name is Jacob. If you remember their birth, they're twins. Jacob and Esau are twins. Jacob's name means the supplanter, or the one who trips people up, because there is a struggle even in Rebekah's womb, which baby is going to come out first. And as Esau comes out, Jacob has a hold of his heel. And the Bible gives us this illustration. He's trying to trip him up even from the womb. And then later, he lives it out in deception. So the Lord says, what is your name? And Jacob says, my name is Jacob. Now, this is my insertion. I think the Lord is saying, the last time this was asked of you in your house by your father, you said, my name is Esau. Remember, he dressed up like Esau, and he deceived his father, pretending to be Esau. And finally, when he confessed, he said, I am Jacob. Then the Lord said, you shall no longer be called Jacob. From this day forward, you're going to be called Israel. So that's where Israel gets its name, and it means prince with God. So this is my takeaway. Until you and I come clean with God, who we really are, it's hard for him to promote us to what we can be until we become clean with who we are right now. True repentance is you really coming clean with God. This is who I am. That's true repentance. It's when we get before God, and most of us here have done that. You don't deny it. You don't try to soft sell it. You don't say, well, I'm pretty good. That wasn't me, or I had a good reason for doing that. You have to come to a real accountability to say, this is who I am. And then God says, if you will confess who you really are, then I'm going to promote you, and you're going to be a prince with me because you've acknowledged who you are. And guess what? This is what I believe, and I believe the Bible teaches it. We're all princes and princesses with God. He's the king, and we're his kids. So this is what king's kids are called. And not much of this left, but in England they still have a little bit of this left, right? So if there's a queen or a king, All the kids are called what? Prince and princesses. And now God is looking at Jacob and he says, now you're my prince because I'm the king. Only one king, but there's a whole lot of prince and princesses, right? And that's the children of God. Well, anyway, this is a little bit of part of this dysfunctional family. Gives us a lot of hope that God can use people like us. And let me tell you, it's all about mercy and grace here, right? Even under the old patriarchal time, even before the law, these people need a lot of mercy and grace. And guess what? We all do today. Well, stand with me. Thanks for being here tonight. Hopefully you got something out of that. And it'll be something that you can use later. And actually, it helps you understand other biblical stories if you get this down.